Hello, you're on the Reddit Reveals channel. The receipt was still in the bag. She forgot to throw it out. I don't know why I checked. I never check. I've never been the paranoid type. I never cared what dress cost what, or how much she spent on hair products, or wine, or yoga classes I suspected she didn't attend anymore. But that day, when I brought the bag in from her car, something just felt wrong. It was a men's hoodie, size large, black, zip-up, still with the tags. She told me she hated hoodies like that. Said they made people look lazy. But this one was folded neatly, placed inside the paper bag with a thank you card. One of those blank inside ones with gold foil leaves on the cover. And the receipt. 2 items. 1. Men's L-zip hoodie, $74.95. 2. Artisan chocolate sampler, 12 PC, $26. 00. No note. No explanation. Just that. And a lie she didn't know I'd caught yet. Because 3 hours earlier, she told me she was running errands for her sister's baby shower. Said she was at Target. Even sent me a picture of a diaper cake. She was smiling in the pic. But behind her, a brick wall with ivy. There's no ivy at Target. So I sat on the couch, hoodie in hand, receipt unfolded on my knee, and stared at the floor for I don't know how long. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe loud. I just noticed everything all at once. Her charger wasn't plugged in where it used to be. The coffee table didn't have her glass ring stains anymore, like she'd been careful to clean up after herself, but only recently. Her favorite blanket, the one she never watched TV without, hadn't moved in days. She was already halfway gone. She just hadn't told me yet. I didn't confront her that night. Or the next. I acted like nothing was different. Smiled. Made her tea. Asked about her sister's baby. She lied again. Said her sister was getting nervous about the epidural. I nodded. Asked questions. Memorized the story. All the while, I kept the bag. Didn't hide it. Didn't toss it. I just placed it neatly in her closet, right on top of her folded sweaters. And still, she said nothing. By the end of the week, I had a drawer full of clues. A half-burned receipt for dinner at a place we've never been. A text preview that said, I miss the way you smell. A voicemail from a number saved as delivery guy saying, same time tomorrow. She really thought she was clever. But here's the thing, I didn't explode. I didn't go through her phone. I didn't hire anyone. I just observed. Quietly. I let her dig her own grave with every soft lie, every too long shower, every unexplained delay coming home from work. And then I wrote her a letter. Not to beg, not to accuse, just to end it. Everything I had left to say, I said in 4 pages, folded into thirds, slipped into an envelope, and left on her pillow. I packed before she got home. Took only what I needed. No arguments. No dramatic exits. No slammed doors. Just silence. She didn't know I knew until she saw my goodbye letter. And that silence? It was louder than any fight we could have had. I watched her read it from my car. Maybe that makes me sound pathetic. Maybe it is pathetic. But after everything, after all the quiet gaslighting, the vanishing warmth, the polite half-smiles that replaced kisses, I just needed to see it. I needed to watch the moment the mask cracked. I'd parked across the street, in front of the Andersons' place. Their security light blinked behind me like a heartbeat. I saw her come in through the front door like she always did, phone in hand, purse on shoulder, eyes glued to the screen. She was smiling at something. No. Someone. She didn't even notice the suitcase missing from the hallway, or the fact that my charger was gone from the outlet near the stairs. But she noticed the envelope. That, she saw immediately. I had placed it right on her pillow, just slightly off-center, like it was waiting for handwritten pages inside. No yelling. No swearing. Just truth, stripped bare. I didn't accuse her. I didn't even use the word cheating. I didn't need to. I listed dates, places, questions she'd answered differently than reality could have allowed. And I ended it with something I hadn't said to her in months. I loved you, and I waited for you, but you already left. I saw her freeze. Right there in the window. She stood at the foot of the bed, envelope in one hand, fingers trembling just enough to betray her. Then she sat down slowly, like her knees weren't sure they could hold her weight. The whole room was still. Even the curtains didn't move. She didn't cry. Not yet. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. I could see her turn the pages over, then back again. She read it twice. Maybe 3 times. And then the inevitable happened. She picked up her phone. She called me. Twice. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. The The first one was just my name. The second was, Ellis, please. And then, can we talk? Please. I didn't mean for it to get like this. Still, I didn't respond. I just sat there watching the shadow of the woman I married try to figure out how everything slipped through her fingers. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel crazy. I didn't feel like I was too sensitive, or overthinking again, or making something out of nothing. I felt like I was finally seeing clearly. 10 minutes later, the porch light came on, and she stepped outside, barefoot, holding her phone like it could summon me. She stared into the dark street, like she could sense I was nearby. She whispered something. I saw her lips move, but I couldn't hear it from the car, and I didn't want to. Whatever story she was rehearsing wasn't for me anymore. What shocked me, though, was what happened next. She didn't go back inside. She ran to her car. I sat up in my seat, unsure whether to follow her or not. The engine roared to life, and the headlights swept the neighborhood. I ducked, just barely avoiding the glare. Then she peeled out of the driveway like something was on fire. And that's when I realized something I hadn't accounted for. She wasn't running from something. She was running to someone. Wyatt. Or whoever he really was. She thought she could fix this the same way she fixed every mess before. Redirect, downplay, rewrite the script. But I'd already left the stage. I wasn't part of her show anymore. I started the car. And for the first time in months, I didn't care where I went next. I wasn't going to follow her. That had never been the plan. But when I saw the taillights vanish at the end of the block, something snapped. I threw the car in gear without even thinking. I didn't need to know where she was going. I already knew. The way she drove, the urgency in it, the desperation in her posture. She was going to him. And I wanted to see exactly how far the lie went. She didn't notice me behind her. I kept 2, sometimes 3 cars back. She ran 1 red light. California rolled 2 stop signs, turned off onto Briar Hill Road, the same direction her so-called work retreats always took place. I used to believe her. When she'd pack a tiny bag and tell me she needed a weekend to recharge with her co-workers at the lodge by the creek, I never questioned it. Why would I? She even brought back fake photos once. Group shots I now realized didn't include her at all. This time, she didn't go to the lodge. She pulled into a residential neighborhood 15 minutes out, parked in front of a ranch-style house with wind chimes and a broken porch light. The kind of place that looks like nothing important ever happens there. But something very important was about to. I passed by slowly, lights off, heart pounding. Her car was in the driveway. The porch light flickered on for half a second. Then, the door opened. A man stood there, barefoot, sweatpants, t-shirt with a faded band logo. He looked like the kind of guy who played guitar, but never quite made it. Not threatening. Not impressive. Just average. That's what burned the most. If he were some hyper-successful, chiseled, 6-figure stereotype, maybe I could have told myself she fell for status or power. But this guy? He was just some mid-tier nobody with a crooked grin and bedroom hair. She ran up to him like they hadn't seen each other in years. No hesitation. No shame. He kissed her on the neck, not the lips, and that somehow made it worse. It was casual, rehearsed, like they did it all the time. And then I noticed something that made my stomach twist harder than anything else had so far. The passenger seat of her car was already reclined. She hadn't just driven there. She'd been there earlier, probably right before coming home to read my letter, probably right before texting me those desperate apologies. She'd gone to him to figure out what to say to me. That's when I knew I hadn't just been plan B. I'd been the safety net, the emotional doormat, the stability she kept warm while chasing chaos with someone else. And the worst part? She still hadn't told him I was gone. I could see it in the way she smiled. She hadn't told him she got caught. She hadn't told him there was a letter. She was still pretending nothing had changed. I watched them disappear inside, the porch light clicking off behind them like the final nail in a coffin. That should have been enough. I should have driven away. I'd said my piece, made my exit, kept my dignity. But something kept me rooted there, something ugly, something needy. I wanted to know how long this had been going on. I wanted to know if he'd ever even heard my name. I wanted to hear her say the truth out loud. So I waited. I waited in the dark, outside the house where my marriage had been quietly dying for months. At 3:17 a.m., the door opened again. She came out alone. Hair messy, hoodie on, his hoodie, the same one from the receipt. She wasn't crying. She didn't look guilty. If anything, she looked empty. Like all her energy had been drained. and she was just going through the motions now. She stood by her car for a moment, looked up at the sky, then pulled out her phone. I didn't need to guess who she was calling. My phone vibrated once. Then again. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. Not yet. I just sat there in the dark, engine off, a ghost watching the wreckage of his own life walk away from him like it never mattered. Tomorrow, she'd try to spin a new story. Say it was a mistake. Say she didn't mean it. But I wouldn't be there to hear it. Because now, I had a plan of my own. I hadn't planned on going back to the house. That part of my life was supposed to be over. Clean break. No second guessing. No boomerang regrets. But there was one thing I couldn't stop thinking about. The notebook. It was hers, a leather-bound journal she kept tucked between two cookbooks in the kitchen, like it was some sacred text nobody was supposed to find. She said it was for recipes, but I'd seen the same pages before, opened by mistake once while looking for the cinnamon. It wasn't recipes. It was handwriting. Her handwriting. Dense, slanted, rushed. I hadn't read more than a sentence before she snatched it from me and smiled like I had touched something indecent. She never kept a diary before. Not in all 7 years. That journal had been bugging me for weeks. So the day after I followed her to his house, I went back. She wasn't home. I checked the driveway first, even knocked, knowing there wouldn't be an answer. I still had my key. When I opened the front door, it felt like breaking into someone else's home. The place already smelled different. His cologne, maybe. Something woodsy and smug. The framed photo of us from our trip to Oregon was gone. The bookshelf had been rearranged. My coffee mug, the one that said "World's Okayest Husband," had been moved to the far back corner of the cabinet, behind her fancy wine glasses. I didn't waste time. Went straight to the kitchen, pulled the cookbooks apart, and found it. Right where it always was. Same dark cover. Same elastic band. I opened it. And I wish I hadn't. The first few pages were lists. To-do tasks, random thoughts, shopping reminders. Then came the shift. Page after page of thoughts about me. But not the kind I'd hoped for. No affection, no heartbreak. Just resentment. Quiet, precise, practiced resentment. She'd written things like, "He always thinks saying I love you is enough. Like it makes up for how boring he's become. Why does he ask me how I'm feeling like I'm a patient? It's not caring, it's monitoring. I feel like I live in a hospice of affection. Nothing is alive. Everything is maintained." I kept reading. I couldn't stop. The further I went, the worse it got. Paragraphs detailing how she felt suffocated by the routines I thought were comforting. Whole pages about Wyatt. Yes, she wrote his real name. About how he made her feel seen. How their conversations lit her up inside. How his flaws felt real, while mine were just another thing to fix. One sentence stuck in my chest like a splinter I couldn't dig out. If I'm being honest, I think I started falling for Wyatt the night Ellis gave me that necklace. It felt like a guilt gift. I felt pity for him, not love. That necklace was our anniversary. She cried when I gave it to her. Said it was perfect. Said it reminded her of the first night we met. I spent weeks picking it out. I sold my old mountain bike to afford it. She pitied me. I put the notebook down and just sat on the floor, knees to my chest, breathing like I'd just run a marathon in a snowstorm. There's a kind of grief that doesn't scream, it just hums in your blood. That's what it felt like. A dull, vibrating grief that filled every inch of me until my skin felt too tight. I don't remember leaving. I don't even remember driving away. I just remember suddenly being parked in a grocery store parking lot, my hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me from floating away. She didn't just fall out of love. She rewrote me in her mind. Turned me into a burden she wore like a winter coat in July. And the worst part? I didn't see it. I refused to see it. I held on to the scraps, convinced they were a quilt. That night, she texted again. "Ellis, please. Can we just talk?" And for the first time, I answered. No. She called. I ignored it. Then I blocked her number. Not because I hated her, but because I was finally starting to mourn her. And you can't mourn something that keeps trying to explain itself. She wasn't supposed to find me. I had made sure of that. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't told anyone where I went. Not even close friends. My phone was turned off. No social media logins. No digital breadcrumbs to follow. I figured she'd try a few calls, maybe a dramatic email or two, and eventually move on. But I forgot about my mother. I was asleep on the old pull-out couch in her guest room, or more accurately, trying to sleep. That couch had the same metal bar in the middle it's had since the 90s, the one that feels like it's trying to split your spine in two. The TV was still playing one of those late-night courtroom shows no one actually watches, casting flashes of blue and orange across the walls. I dozed off at some point, half-dressed, mind swimming in static. Then I heard the knock. Not frantic, not loud, just two quiet taps. Like guilt had a rhythm and she'd memorized it. I stayed still. Maybe it was just a neighbor. Maybe Mom had ordered something and it was a delivery. But then I heard her voice. Mrs. Hayworth? I know he's here. She used the full name. My mom's full name. Like she was afraid to sound too familiar. I froze. There was a long pause. I imagined my mother standing there in her robe, clutching her tea, narrowing her eyes like she always did when someone tried to manipulate her. Then the front door creaked open. You've got 5 minutes, she said. Then I heard her walk away, heels clicking, no patience in her steps. I thought about pretending to be asleep. Maybe if I waited long enough, she'd get embarrassed and leave. But that door handle, it turned anyway. Cora stepped into the room like it still belonged to her. She didn't look like the woman I last saw in my rearview mirror. Her makeup was smudged. Her eyes were tired. Not red, not crying, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from being caught in too many lies for too long. She didn't speak right away. Just stood there in the doorway, eyes flicking over the room. The boxes on the floor. My clothes folded in neat piles. The notebook in the corner. Yes, I'd taken it. She saw it too. Her lips parted slightly when she did, like she wanted to say something, then thought better of it. I read everything. I said before she could start. My voice cracked more than I wanted it to. She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that. Then she whispered, I didn't mean for you to see all of it. I laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. You mean the part where you pitied me? Or the part where you said why it made you feel alive while I just paid the bills and asked too many questions? She stepped forward. I stood up. We were still 6 feet apart, but the air between us felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I didn't know how to leave you, she said quietly. You were so good to me, and I didn't want to be the villain. So you became one anyway. Silence. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something I wasn't expecting. The necklace. The one from our anniversary. She held it in her palm, fingers curled slightly around it like she was afraid it might turn to ash. I didn't return it, she said. I couldn't. I didn't want to hear this. I didn't want the symbols. I didn't want the sentiment. I wanted answers. But she didn't offer those. What do you want from me? I finally asked. She looked up, eyes glossy but dry. Closure. No, I said. Closure is for people who tried. You didn't try. You wrote me off in a notebook before you ever opened your mouth. I thought she might yell, or cry, or beg. But instead, she did the worst thing she could have done. She nodded, like she agreed with me. Like she already knew there was nothing left to fight for. She placed the necklace on the table, took one last look at the room, then whispered, I'm sorry I made you small. And just like that, she left. No dramatic exit. No final kiss. Just the sound of the front door closing and the quiet return of courtroom TV in the background. I didn't pick up the necklace. I just sat back on the couch, stared at it, and let the weight of that sentence press into me harder than anything in her journal ever had. I'm sorry I made you small. Funny how someone can shrink your whole world and then walk away like it was an accident. 3 days passed. I stayed at my mother's house like some grown man who couldn't quite accept his own divorce. I didn't like the way the furniture felt too familiar, like the past was trying to comfort me, and I wasn't sure I deserved to be comforted yet. The house had that smell of old carpets and lemon furniture polish. It was safe. It was clean. And I hated it. I hadn't told anyone what happened. Not my mother. Not my coworkers. Not even my brother, who texted to ask if I was just ghosting life now or what. I ignored him. I wasn't ready to tell anyone how thoroughly I'd been hollowed out. And then, like everything else in this entire unraveling mess, the next truth came by accident. It was raining that night. Not the dramatic thunderstorm kind. Just a steady, boring drizzle that made the windows fog up and everything smell like wet sidewalk. I couldn't sleep, so I decided to drive back to the house. Not to confront her. Not even to go inside. Just to see it. To remind myself that the home I thought I had was now nothing but drywall and betrayal. When I got there, her car wasn't in the driveway. I sat in mine for a few minutes, watching the windows, wondering if maybe he was inside. Maybe she'd moved him in already. Maybe I'd knock and hear her laugh from upstairs, the way she used to laugh with me, before it all faded into politeness and lies. But the house was dark. I don't know what pushed me, but I used my key. Maybe it was the rain. Maybe it was the ache. Maybe I just needed to feel one last splinter of pain to finally push myself over the edge. The living room was exactly how I'd left it, except colder, quieter. The air felt thinner, like someone had opened every window at once and left it like that for days. I moved through the house like a stranger in my own memories. And then I walked into the guest room. She never used it for anything. We joked that it was the graveyard, a place where old furniture went to die. But now, the bed was made. The closet door was slightly open. There was a bag on the chair. And beside it, a phone. Not hers. Smaller. Black case. No lock screen. Like it hadn't been set up with care. Like it wasn't meant to be found. I picked it up and it opened immediately. No passcode. The last message was from someone saved as S. No full name. Just a single letter. The message was short. He doesn't know. Meet tomorrow. Same time. My stomach dropped. I scrolled. My hands were shaking and the screen blurred from the sweat on my fingers, but I kept going. Dozens of messages. Some to Wyatt. Others to names I didn't recognize. But one thread stood out, the one with S. They weren't romantic. Not obviously. But they were conspiratorial. Strategic. She was talking about me. About how to position the story. About what to say if I found out. About how to ease me out without sparking guilt. There were phrases I couldn't believe she wrote. Things like, if he spirals, just remind him how much space he asked for. Let the guilt do the work. He's the kind of man who writes apology texts even when you hurt him. It's manageable. The necklace bought me at least another month. Didn't expect that. My blood turned cold. She was playing both sides, and not just romantically. She was managing me. Like I was some oversensitive project she needed to wrap up with a clean bow. This wasn't just cheating. This was orchestration. I took photos of the texts. Every screen. Every scroll. I backed them up. Not because I planned to use them, but because part of me needed proof. Not for court. Not for friends. For myself. I needed to remember I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I wasn't too much. I was just betrayed by someone who had practiced the betrayal in advance. When I left the house that night, I didn't feel rage. I felt a strange, hollow calm, like the last ember of a fire finally blinked out, and I could hear myself breathe again without the smoke. I drove back to my mom's. I didn't look back. That night, I slept. For the first time in weeks, I actually slept. The morning after I found the second phone, I turned my own back on for the first time in a while. 27 missed texts. For voicemails. A couple of random email pings. One from her. One from my old landlord. And one from my brother, the only one I actually opened. It was a simple message. Just said, call me. Now. I know. I stared at the screen for a while, trying to figure out what he meant. I hadn't told him anything. Not a word about Cora. Not about the affair, the journal, the other man, the second phone. I hadn't even told him I'd left. He lived 2 hours away, in a condo with his always too cheerful girlfriend and a dog he talked about more than his own family. We weren't close. Not since the wedding. Still, something about the tone made my chest tighten. So I called. He picked up on the first ring. No hello. Just, she's been seeing Wyatt for over a year. My throat went dry. Who told you that? I asked, already knowing the answer. There was a long pause. I could hear a dog barking in the background. Then he exhaled. She told me. The room felt like it tipped sideways. What do you mean she told you? Not directly. It was at Mom's birthday dinner last fall. Remember when you couldn't make it? Cora came anyway. Sat next to me the whole night. She got a little wine drunk. Started rambling about how hard things were. Said she was losing herself in the shadows of marriage or some nonsense. I didn't take her seriously at first. But then she said something weird. He paused again, and I could hear the guilt in his breath before he spoke. She said, sometimes I wish Ellis would just cheat. It would make this easier. I sat down on the edge of the bed. The weight of the phone suddenly felt like a brick in my hand. You didn't think to tell me that? I asked, my voice low, tight. I didn't know what to do, man, he said. At the time I thought maybe you guys were just in a rough patch. Then she unfollowed me on Instagram. Blocked me a week later. I figured she was embarrassed, or maybe regretted saying it. I didn't know it was this serious. Not until last week. Wyatt posted something on his story. Nothing obvious. Just a photo of a picnic table, 2 wine glasses. A ring box. I froze. A ring box? She's engaged. I asked, voice cracking like dried wood. I don't know. It might have been for someone else. But she was tagged in the post. Then untagged an hour later. I screenshotted it, just in case. I didn't want to believe it. He texted me the photo while we were still on the call. I opened it. There it was. That same picnic table I'd helped her pick out from the flea market 3 years ago. The same one we'd stained together in the backyard on that lazy Saturday, where she wore one of my old t-shirts and we danced barefoot in sawdust. Now it was their memory. And the ring box? Empty. Open. Waiting. I didn't even know what I felt anymore. Rage had dried up. Sadness had melted into numbness. Now all I felt was vacancy. Like my life had become a rental property someone else had already moved into. I'm sorry, man, my brother said, his voice softer now. I should have told you. I just didn't want to believe she'd do that to you. To anyone, really. She didn't do it to anyone, I said. She did it to me. Because I made it easy. There was silence on the line. He didn't argue. And I didn't blame him. I hung up, dropped the phone on the nightstand, and stared out the window at my mom's hydrangeas, the ones Cora used to compliment every summer like she actually cared. All I could think was how fast some people rebuild their lives while you're still crawling through the debris. I wasn't angry that she'd moved on. I was angry that she started sketching out the blueprints before she even told me the house was on fire. And now I was sitting in the ashes, wondering if the whole thing had ever really stood at all. It's strange how grief doesn't really end. It just softens. The sharp edges round out over time. The parts that used to make you flinch become dull memories, like background noise from a house you no longer live in. That's where I am now. It's been 11 months since I left the letter on the pillow. 9 months since I found the second phone. 6 since I saw her name on the guest list of someone else's engagement party. Not hers, but close enough to twist the knife again. And yet here I am. Whole. Still dented in places, sure. But no longer bleeding. I moved out of state in April. Somewhere quieter. A place with less history, fewer reminders. I didn't run. I just stepped forward. Bought a small house near the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Hardwood floors. A crooked fence I keep meaning to fix. There's a small used bookstore down the street where I volunteer on Saturdays. I shelve paperbacks and drink bad coffee and talk to people who know nothing about my past. It's liberating, honestly. No one here calls me the guy whose wife cheated. I'm just Ellis. Just a man with good manners and too many flannels. For a while, I didn't date. I didn't even look at anyone. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't afraid. I was just tired of being cracked open. Love felt like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. But eventually, slowly, I started smiling again. Genuinely. Laughing without flinching. Saying, I'm good, and meaning it. It surprised me the first time I caught myself humming while doing the dishes. It felt like reclaiming something I didn't know I'd lost. Then, a few weeks ago, someone left a note in one of the books at the store. A real, handwritten note, not addressed to anyone. It just said, some endings aren't failures. They're just doors you were never meant to stay behind. I don't know who wrote it, but I folded it and kept it in my wallet. I read it sometimes when the ghosts try to creep back in, when I find an old voicemail I forgot to delete, or when a random scent punches me in the chest. It reminds me that closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes, it's just a decision. I never heard from Cora again after that night at my mother's house. No more texts. No final speech. Just silence, the clean kind. I'm grateful for it now. She let me go the way she never could when we were together. Maybe that's the only honest thing she ever gave me. Last week, I unpacked the last of my boxes. Inside one of them, I found the necklace I gave her, the one she left behind on purpose, pretending it meant something. For a moment, I felt that familiar sting rise in my chest. But I didn't let it stay. I walked outside, stood by the creek behind the house, and tossed it into the water. Not out of anger. Not revenge. Just release. It sank quietly, like it belonged there. Like I finally did too.